At 11:47 p.m., Thaddeus Garrison opened his garage door and found his wife freezing to death. Not from an accident, from family betrayal. His daughter and son-in-law had locked her out in 42-degree weather, while they drank his wine inside the house he'd bought in 1979. Margot's lips were blue, her knees scraped from concrete. She didn't recognize him for 5 seconds. "Harry?" Her voice barely a whisper. "They said you wouldn't want to see me." 68 years old, and Thaddeus was kneeling on the same garage floor where he'd taught Vivian to ride a bike, where he'd kissed Margot the night they closed on this house. "Who said that?" "Viv and Dash. Said I was a burden." Her hands shook violently. "That I needed to learn my lesson." 7 weeks. That's how long he'd been gone. 49 days at Mayo Clinic. 6 weeks of targeted radiation for stage 1 prostate cancer, plus 1 week of monitoring. 98% survival rate. He'd told only Pemberton, his former CFO. He'd wanted to test them. See what happened when the patriarch stepped away. Now he knew. "When did you last eat?" "Tuesday. They said groceries were too expensive, that I was wasting your money." "Tuesday. It was Friday." Thaddeus carried her to his Lincoln Navigator. Didn't go through the house. Not yet. At Mercy Hospital, Dr. Chen pulled him aside after the exam. "Mr. Garrison, the bruising on your wife's wrists suggests restraint. The malnutrition indicates sustained neglect. This is elder abuse under California Penal Code 368. I'm required to file a report." She handed him a card. "But if you want real justice, document everything before they know you're back." In his Holiday Inn room at 3 a.m., Thaddeus stared at his reflection. When had his hands become his father's hands? Liver spots, prominent veins, the tremor in his left hand more noticeable at night. He'd been a wrestler in high school, a Marine, could bench press 280 pounds at 25. Now he got winded, climbing stairs. But his mind was sharper than ever. That was aging's cruel joke. Your body betrays you right when your wisdom peaks. Dashiell had gambled on physical weakness, meaning mental weakness. He was about to learn the difference between strength and power. Strength faded, power compounded. Thaddeus made 4 calls. Call 1. Pemberton Sterling Aldrich. "Pem, it's worse than we thought. I need a full forensic audit." "Already started, Thad. Here's what we're looking at. Total empire value, $340 million. Protected in trusts, $140 million. They can't touch it. Fixed assets, warehouses, equipment, $82 million, requires board approval to liquidate. Operating capital, $118 million liquid. They hit the liquid accounts hard, forged your signature on wire transfers, even a HELOC on the Palisades house for $4.2 million. How much is left? $31 million. They moved $87 million in 7 weeks. 74% of his liquid wealth, gone. The fixed assets? Safe for now. But I found emails. Dashiell was contacting commercial real estate brokers. Another week, and he'd have liquidated everything. Call 2. Callista Revere. Esquerno. Callista. I need criminal charges. Wire fraud, forgery, financial exploitation. I want consequences that stick. Elder abuse cases need solid evidence. I have Ring camera footage, bank statements, medical records showing hypothermia and malnutrition, and I need to know, how did they activate power of attorney? I never signed anything. Callista's voice went cold. I'll find out. If they forged POA documents, that's federal wire fraud. FBI territory. Call 3. Dr. Octavia Sable. The forensic psychologist listened as he explained the theft, the abuse, the systematic isolation. Mr. Garrison, what you're describing is textbook narcissistic personality disorder with pathological gambling. Your son-in-law likely sees your family as his winning ticket. Validation he's sought his entire life. Each gambling loss deepens his shame, requiring bigger wins to compensate. It's a death spiral. Can you predict his next moves? Give him rope, he'll hang himself. Narcissists always do. Call 4. The plan. Thaddeus didn't call Vivian. Instead, he opened his iPad photo album. Vivian at 3, chocolate ice cream on her face. Vivian at 8, gap-toothed smile. Vivian at 22, Stanford graduation, hugging him tight. Somewhere between that girl and the woman who'd left her mother to freeze, something had broken. Men his age weren't supposed to cry. But Thaddeus Garrison, who'd fired 200 employees during the 2008 recession without flinching, who'd stared down union bosses, sat alone and let himself break. For 5 minutes. Then he wiped his face and got to work. This wasn't about revenge. Sweet revenge was a myth perpetuated by movies. This was about justice served cold, methodically, and permanently. About consequences that would change not just his family's fate, but the system itself. He opened his laptop and typed an email to Catherine Morrison at 60 Minutes. Subject line: Elder abuse case with federal implications, exclusive access offered. By dawn, he had a response. 72 hours. That's what Thaddeus gave himself to build an unbreakable case. Rage clouds judgment. Revenge is amateur. Justice is professional. He'd learned this negotiating with unions, surviving 3 recessions, rebuilding after 2008. You don't win wars with emotion, you win with intelligence. Hour 18. The forgery. Pemberton called from his forensic accountant's office. Thad, we found how they got POA authority. You need to sit down. I'm already sitting. They filed paperwork claiming you were incapacitated, presented falsified Mayo Clinic documents to your bank, forged letterhead stating you had diminished capacity, and verbally granted Dashiell temporary authority. Thaddeus's grip tightened on the phone. Verbal means nothing without my signature. They had that too. A POA document with your signature. I know. The forensic document examiner says it's digital forgery. Someone scanned your signature from old contracts, pasted it onto a POA template. The metadata shows the PDF was created on Dashiell's laptop, March 15th, 2:34 a.m. He was probably drunk or desperate. Wire fraud, forgery, elder abuse. The charges were stacking beautifully. Hour 36. The gambling debt. Dr. Sable's expanded report arrived encrypted. Subject's background: childhood poverty, trailer park outside Reno. Mother was casino cocktail waitress, father unknown. Worked through UNLV, graduated with honors. Met Vivian Garrison at networking event. She was 31, he was 29. Subject exhibits shame-driven narcissism. The gambling isn't about risk, it's about validation. Winning is the only time he feels enough. Analysis of credit card statements shows acceleration. $12,000 monthly losses in year 1 of marriage. $50,000 monthly by year 3, $400,000 monthly in recent months. Current debt to Emerald Club, $12 million. The club operates in legal gray zones, high net worth consortium, membership by invitation. Stakes start at $100K per hand. They use cryptocurrency, which makes tracing difficult but not impossible. The debt collectors calling subject are lawyers with Swiss accounts, not criminal enforcers. Legal muscle. Subject is terrified but not in physical danger. Prediction. Subject will make increasingly desperate decisions. Recommend providing controlled opportunity for self-incrimination. Thaddeus read it twice. Almost felt pity. A boy from a trailer park who'd married into wealth, thought he'd finally made it, then watched it slip through his fingers at blackjack tables. Almost. Then he remembered Margot's blue lips. Almost wasn't enough. Hour 48. The bait. Pem, I need you to create a dummy account. Weak security. Obvious password. Balance, $5 million. You're giving him rope. I'm documenting every meter of it. This money is traceable bait. Every transaction he makes adds another federal charge. What if he doesn't take it? He will. Addicts always do, especially when they're drowning. The account went live at noon. By hour 51, Dashiell had found it. The $5 million disappeared across 5 days. Not instantly, but methodically tracked. Day 1, 3:47 p.m. Wire transfer to Cayman Islands, LLC. Day 3, 9:22 a.m. Funds cleared. Moved to Gibraltar entity, day 4, 2:15 p.m. Cryptocurrency purchase, 4.8 M in Bitcoin. Day 5, 11:03 a.m. Bitcoin sold. USD withdrawn to Vegas casino account. Day 5, 8:30 p.m. 17 separate cash transactions at Caesar's Palace, $9,500 each, just under the $10,000 currency transaction report threshold. Every transaction documented, every step traceable, every mistake cataloged. He's not even trying to hide it. Pemberton marveled during their daily call. He's panicking. Good, panic makes people sloppy. Thaddeus pulled up the transaction log. How much total now? $87 million stolen from operating accounts, but he's burning through it faster than he took it. Casino losses are catastrophic. Classic gambler's fallacy, chasing losses, thinking one big win will fix everything. Thaddeus stared at his iPad screen. 72 years old. No, 68. Every number represented something, not just money. Behind every dollar was a night without sleep in 1978, a cross-country flight to save a contract, 30 years of missed birthdays because of emergency board meetings. Dashiell hadn't stolen money. He'd stolen fragments of a life Thaddeus had assembled piece by piece. Keep monitoring, he told Pemberton, and make sure every transaction hits the FBI's desk. I want a paper trail that could survive Supreme Court scrutiny. You're thinking bigger than criminal charges. Thaddeus looked toward the hotel window. 3 miles away sat his house, the house where he'd raised his daughter, loved his wife, built his American dream, occupied by people who'd tried to erase him. I'm thinking about legacy. This isn't just about Margot and me. It's about every elderly person whose family sees them as an ATM instead of a human being, every grandfather whose daughter forges his signature, every grandmother whose son steals her pension. The Senate bill, Elder Financial Exploitation Reform. Exactly. To change federal law, I need a case so documented, so airtight, that Congress can't ignore it. I need to be the test case that proves the system is broken. So you're letting him keep stealing. I'm letting him build his own cage, bar by bar. And when he's done, every politician in Washington will know his name and know what happens when families betray their own. Pemberton was quiet. Then, you've changed, Thad. This isn't just about protecting Margot anymore. No, Thaddeus agreed. It's about making sure the next Margot has protections we didn't have. That's not revenge. That's investment in a system that actually works. He hung up and made one more call. Catherine, Morrison? Thaddeus Garrison, I'm ready to talk. But I need the segment to air on April 14th. That's the night my son-in-law is throwing a party in my house with my money. I want your story to interrupt his celebration. A pause. That's 3 weeks. We'll need to move fast. I've been moving fast for 50 years. Let's finish strong. 3 weeks after Thaddeus returned from Mayo Clinic, Dashiell made his fatal mistake. He threw a party. Not just any party, a celebration, catered by Nobu. $300 bottles of Chateau Margaux, guest list full of Los Angeles social climbers who thought they were witnessing a young couple's inheritance windfall. The invitation read, "Celebrating new beginnings, Dashiell and Vivian Locke." They were celebrating his money, in his house, while Margot recovered from hypothermia in a private facility. Callista called immediately. "Please tell me you're not going to the party." "I'm not." "Good, because I'm going to give them a gift instead." Thaddeus, the kind that keeps on giving. April 14th. The party started at 7 p.m. Champagne flowed. Dashiell wore a new Patek Philippe, $85,000, purchased with Thaddeus's money. Vivian laughed with guests who praised her independence and entrepreneurial spirit. At 7:03 p.m., 60 Minutes began airing. Catherine Morrison's voice, authoritative and measured. Tonight, we investigate a growing crisis in America, elder financial abuse. And we begin with a story that reads like a thriller, but is devastatingly real. Cut to Thaddeus. sitting in a Manhattan studio via satellite. Mr. Garrison, you're alleging your own daughter participated in elder abuse while you received cancer treatment. These are serious accusations. I'm not alleging. I have evidence. The screen filled with bank statements, medical reports. Then the Ring camera footage, time-stamped, crystal clear. Dashiell escorting Margot to the garage. Her voice, I'm cold, Dash. His response, you need to learn. When you waste Thaddeus's money, there are consequences. The door closing, the lock turning, the timestamp advancing. 9:47 p.m., 10:52 p.m., 11:47 p.m., temperature display 42 degrees. At 7:05 p.m., someone at Dashiell's party pulled up the segment on their phone. By 7:08 p.m., champagne glass met marble floor. He's lying! Dashiell's voice cracked across the room. That old man is trying to cut us out. This is manipulation. But guests were already leaving, backing away, because everyone had just watched the footage. Everyone had heard the medical testimony. Everyone knew that being associated with this family feud was social suicide. Catherine's interview continued. Why come forward now? Why not handle this privately? Because private solutions don't change systems. Thaddeus leaned forward. Right now, 2.4 million elderly Americans experience financial abuse annually. Average loss, $120,000, their entire life savings. 70% of the time, family members are the perpetrators. This isn't a private matter. This is a national crisis. What do you want to see happen? The Financial Exploitation of Seniors Act. Federal protections with teeth. Mandatory reporting by financial institutions. Asset freezes pending investigation. Criminal penalties that actually deter this behavior. And victim restitution funds. So when families steal, the elderly person doesn't end up destitute. And your daughter? Your son-in-law? Thaddeus looked directly into the camera. I want them prosecuted to the fullest extent. I want them to serve as examples that this behavior has consequences. Right now, the bad boys in these real-life stories walk away. They drain accounts, forge signatures, commit fraud, then hire expensive lawyers, and plead down. That ends now. The segment concluded with Dr. Chen's testimony. Mrs. Garrison presented with severe hypothermia, malnutrition consistent with sustained neglect, and bruising indicating physical restraint. In my 15 years as an ER physician, I've never seen elder abuse this calculated. By Monday morning, the segment had 47 million views. By Tuesday, FBI agents arrived at the Palisades house. They arrested Dashiell at noon, perp walk, handcuffs, news helicopters overhead. TMZ captured everything. The charges: elder abuse, California Penal Code 368, wire fraud, 18 U.S. Code Par 1343, forgery, California Penal Code 470, financial exploitation of a dependent adult, identity theft, money laundering. Bail hearing was theater. Callista argued for maximum bail. Your Honor, the defendant stole $87 million from elderly victims who trusted him. He has $12 million in gambling debts to entities operating outside legal jurisdiction. He's a flight risk and a danger to victims who are his own in-laws. We request $15 million cash bail. The public defender tried. My client has community ties. He's a family man. A family man, Callista interrupted, who locked his 66-year-old mother-in-law in a garage in 42-degree weather. Medical records show severe hypothermia and malnutrition from sustained neglect. Forensic evidence shows systematic theft spanning 7 weeks. This isn't a family dispute. It's organized criminal behavior. The judge, a woman in her 60s, looked at Dashiell with open contempt. Bail, $15 million cash. Defendant surrenders passport. GPS monitoring. No contact with victims or witnesses. Next court date, 30 days. Dashiell couldn't make bail. He stayed in county jail. Vivian wasn't arrested. The evidence against her was circumstantial. She'd been present, she'd benefited, but Dashiell had done the forgery and wire transfers. But Thaddeus didn't want her in prison. Prison was easy. Prison let you be a victim. He wanted something harder. They met at a Santa Monica coffee shop. Neutral ground. Callista present, but silent. Vivienne arrived late, sunglasses hiding red eyes. 3 weeks had aged her. The confidence she'd worn like armor was gone. Dad, Thaddeus, didn't stand. Gestured to the chair. She sat. Silence stretched. Then Vivienne broke. I didn't know it would go this far. Dash said you'd left instructions. That Mom was difficult. That you wanted us to manage things. And you believed him. He's my husband. And she's your mother. Thaddeus's voice never rose. When did you stop being the girl who wanted to run a business bigger than mine? The debate champion who destroyed Harvard seniors? The daughter who refused my investment because she needed to succeed on her own? Vivienne flinched. I wanted to make you proud. You did. Past tense. Then you met a man who made you small, who convinced you that you didn't matter except as his accessory. And when push came to shove, you chose him over the woman who gave you life. What do you want me to say? Sorry means nothing without consequences. He slid documents across the table. This is a settlement. You acknowledge your role. You forfeit all claims to my estate, permanently. You undergo 52 weeks of family therapy. You get a job, any job, and work it for 2 years minimum. No trust fund, no loans from friends. You rebuild from the ground up, like I did. What if I refuse? Then Callista files charges. You'll have money for good attorneys. You might win. But you'll spend 5 years in legal battles, and everyone will see you as the woman who helped torture her own mother. Vivienne stared at the paper. One more thing, Thaddeus said. 50% of your earnings goes into a fund, the Margot Garrison Fund for Elder Protection. Your mother's name, your mother's legacy. Every dollar you make half helps people like her. That's not fair. Fair? His voice cut. Your mother has dissociative episodes now. She wakes up screaming. Doctors say she may never fully recover. You did that. So no, Vivienne, 50% of your earnings isn't fair. It's mercy. She signed. Justice served, one signature at a time. Dashiell Locke's trial lasted 6 weeks. Federal prosecutor James Whitmore built his case like a master architect. Every document, every witness, every piece of evidence placed with surgical precision. This wasn't just about one family's betrayal. This was about setting precedent. Jury selection took 3 days. Dashiell's defense wanted younger jurors who might sympathize with financial struggles. Prosecution wanted older jurors who understood retirement anxiety. They settled on 8 men, 4 women. Median age, 55. 3 were caregivers for elderly parents. 1 woman, Patricia Chen, no relation to Dr. Chen, had tears during voir dire when asked about elder care. The demographics weren't accidental. Callista had profiled each juror with military precision. Day 4, the security footage. The prosecution played the Ring camera video on an 85-inch monitor. Timestamp, October 14th, 9:47 p.m. Dashiell Locke, visible in HD, escorting Margot to the garage. She wore a nightgown. He wore a Rolex. I'm cold. Dash. Her voice through the audio, small and afraid. Can I just... You need to learn. His voice mechanical, cold. When you waste Thaddeus's money, there are consequences. But I just wanted soup. The garage. Now. The camera captured him closing the door. The lock clicking. Him walking away without looking back. 3 jurors were crying. The video continued. Timestamps advancing. 10:52 p.m., 11:47 p.m., 12:23 a.m. The door stayed locked. Temperature display, 42 degrees. Margot's faint banging on the door, visible only because the camera caught frame vibrations. At 12:31 a.m., the banging stopped. The courtroom was silent. Dashiell's attorney tried. Your Honor, the emotional prejudice. Overruled. The jury needs to see what the defendant did. Day 12. Thaddeus testifies. Mr. Garrison, Whitmore asked gently, when you found your wife in the garage, what went through your mind? Thaddeus paused. The courtroom waited. I thought about 1975. The night I met her at a Key West diner. She was a waitress. I was a truck driver with a dream and $8,000. She believed in me when I was nobody. 50 years. We built everything together. And my daughter, our daughter, locked her in a garage like she was trash. His voice didn't break, didn't waver, but the jury heard the weight behind every word. What do you want from this trial? I want the law to mean something. I want other families to know, if you abuse elderly people, even your own parents, you will face real consequences, not slaps on the wrist, not plea deals, real accountability. On cross-examination, the defense attorney tried to paint Thaddeus as manipulative. Isn't it true you essentially set up your family to fail? You disappeared without explanation. I went for cancer treatment. If expecting my family not to steal $87 million and abuse my wife while I'm gone is setting them up, then our standards are criminally low. The courtroom laughed. The judge gavelled for silence, but the damage was done. Day 18. Margot's moment. She walked slowly, cane in hand, hair fully gray now, auburn 6 months ago. Mrs. Garrison, the prosecutor asked softly, do you remember October 14th? I remember being cold, barely a whisper, so cold I couldn't feel my hands. I remember thinking, maybe if I fell asleep, Vivian wouldn't have to worry about me anymore. She looked directly at Dashiell. Direct eye contact. You made me feel worthless, like I didn't deserve to exist. That's what abuse is, not just physical pain. It's making someone believe they don't matter. The defense attorney stood. Objection, Your Honor. The witness is... I'm not finished. Margot's voice suddenly firm. I want you to know, Dashiell Locke, that I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to let you take one more day of my life. She turned back to the jury. But forgiveness doesn't mean no consequences. It means I'm free. You're not. Patricia Chen, juror number 7, wasn't the only one, crying now. The verdict deliberation lasted 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing came 3 weeks later. The judge, a woman who'd spent 23 years on the bench, didn't mince words. Mr. Locke, I've seen a lot of cruelty. But what you did to 2 elderly people who welcomed you into their family represents a special kind of evil. You didn't just steal their money, you stole their dignity, their sense of safety, their peace of mind. The law allows consecutive sentences totaling 30 years. The prosecution requested exactly that. But Mr. Garrison has requested something different. 25 years federal prison, no parole possibility. However, if you cooperate with federal investigators on elder abuse reform, participate in law enforcement education programs, and provide congressional testimony about financial exploitation mechanisms, you may petition for review after 15 years. She looked at Thaddeus in the gallery. Mr. Garrison believes even people like you can serve a purpose, that your story can help change the system. I'm not sure I agree, but I'll honor his request. The gavel came down. 25 years, federal correctional facility, no parole, court adjourned. Dashiell was led away in handcuffs. Vivian, sitting in the back row, didn't watch him go. She stared at her hands that had once handed her father wrenches in a garage, back when she wanted to build empires instead of enabling their destruction. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed Thaddeus. Mr. Garrison, do you feel justice was served? He paused, looked at the building where Dashiell's fate had been sealed. Justice isn't a feeling, it's an outcome. Today, the outcome is that 1 man goes to prison, 1 woman rebuilds her life from scratch, and 2.4 million elderly Americans just got a roadmap for fighting back. That's not sweet revenge. That's consequence. There's a difference. He walked away, Callista at his side, toward the car where Margot waited. The real work was just beginning. 6 months after the trial, Thaddeus stood in a Senate hearing room in Washington, D.C. The Financial Exploitation of Seniors Act was up for vote. He was there to testify. Senator Patricia Caldwell, chair of the Special Committee on Aging, introduced him. Mr. Garrison has transformed personal tragedy into federal reform blueprint. His documentation has been instrumental in drafting this legislation. Thaddeus approached the microphone. No notes. Senators, I'm not here for sympathy. I'm here to give you numbers. 2.4 million elderly Americans experience financial abuse annually. 1 in 10 people over 65. Average loss, $120,000, enough to wipe out most retirement savings. 70% of perpetrators are family members. Current state laws are inconsistent. California requires dependency for felony charges. Florida requires a $100,000 minimum loss. Texas has no specific statute. The patchwork doesn't work. This act creates federal standards. Mandatory reporting by financial institutions. Asset freezes pending investigation. Federal wire fraud prosecution in elder abuse cases. And critically, victim restitution funds so stolen from seniors don't end up destitute. Senator Marcus Wright leaned forward. Some opponents call this federal overreach, that family financial matters should remain private. Senator, assault is assault even between family members. Theft is theft even when your daughter does it. We don't call domestic violence a private family matter anymore. We shouldn't do it with elder abuse either. Another senator, your son-in-law received 25 years. That seems punitive. Consequences aren't revenge. They're accountability. He stole $87 million, forged documents, committed wire fraud, and physically abused a vulnerable woman. If he'd robbed a bank for $87 million, would anyone call that sentence punitive? Senator Caldwell asked the final question. What do you want Americans to understand? Thaddeus paused. Thought about Margot recovering in Key West. About Vivian working at the San Diego Elder Rights Advocacy Center. 50% of each paycheck going to the fund bearing her mother's name. About Pemberton, who'd stood by him through everything. Getting old doesn't make you stupid or disposable. I built my company from $8,000 to $340 million. Survived 3 recessions. I'm not senile, I'm just older. If someone like me, with resources, education, a CFO watching my back, can be victimized this badly, imagine what happens to people without those advantages. People depending on Social Security. People whose children are their only advocates. This bill protects the grandmother whose son stole her pension. The grandfather whose daughter forged his reverse mortgage. The millions who worked their whole lives, only to have families treat them like ATMs when they show weakness. Do we protect them, or keep pretending this is private while they die broke and betrayed? Silence filled the room. The bill passed the Senate 3 weeks later, 83-17. The House followed 2 months after. The president signed it in a rose garden ceremony. When reporters asked Margot how she felt, she smiled, that same smile from their 1975 wedding, and said, I married the right man. The patriarch's playbook. Thaddeus died at 84, 16 years after the trial. His will included a section titled, What I Learned. Callista read it at the funeral. On asset protection. I kept 60% of my wealth in liquid accounts. Mistake. Structure 40% in family limited partnerships with spendthrift trusts. Multiple party approval required. Cost, $15,000 in legal fees. Cost of not doing it, $87 million. On trust. Trust with verification isn't paranoia. It's prudence. Hire an independent CPA to audit finances twice yearly. Cost, $5,000 annually. Value, priceless. On legal safeguards. Durable power of attorney is essential, but single signature POA is a loaded gun. Use dual signature requirements. Attorney plus family member, neither having solo veto power. On family. Love your children. But don't confuse love with enabling. The greatest gift I gave Vivian wasn't money. It was the opportunity to rebuild after she'd torn everything down. She's better now, working with integrity, than when she had access to my wealth. On justice. Sweet revenge is a myth. Justice served is reality. I didn't pursue this case for revenge. I did it because silence is complicity. Every person who suffers elder abuse and stays quiet makes it easier for the next perpetrator. 3 years before his death, Pemberton visited the Key West house. They drank bourbon on the porch. Pappy Van Winkle's 23, $300 a pour elsewhere, but they drank it like beer. You changed the law, Pemberton said. Saved thousands. Yeah. Thaddeus watched the sunset. You know what I realized, Pem? I spent 50 years building something. In the end, only my wife and you, a cousin I barely knew, stood by me. Vivian came around. 6 years later, after the damage. He sipped. There's a cost to winning nobody tells you about. You become the kind of man who wins. And that man sits alone, victorious and isolated, wondering if being right was worth being lonely. Was it? Thaddeus looked at Margot through the window, reading peacefully. Ask me when I'm dying. In the hospital room 3 years later, Pemberton did ask. Thaddeus's answer, yes, but barely. Margot lived to 82. She died peacefully on the yacht named Grace, anchored in Key West, where they'd had their first date in 1975. Thaddeus held her hand, surrounded by photos of better times. His obituary headline, Thaddeus Garrison, elder abuse reform advocate, dies at 84. Vivian spoke at his funeral. Not a eulogy, just one paragraph. My father taught me consequences aren't punishment. They're education. He didn't catch me when I fell, but he made sure the ground was solid enough for me to stand back up. I'll spend my life earning the person he hoped I could become. That's not a burden. It's a gift. His headstone in Key West reads, Builder, Husband, Advocate. He chose justice. The Garrison Foundation for Elder Protection continues his work. 400,000 elderly Americans have been protected in its first decade. This isn't just a story. It's a blueprint. Protect yourself. Protect your people. And when the time comes, fight back with everything you have, not for revenge, for justice, or